Hi everyone, I'm Morgan Stevens.
And I'm Carrie Stevens.
And we are excited to welcome you today, wherever you are, to discussion group material based on the sermon series we're looking at together at Mosaic and the book we wrote together. Both are called
Friendship Can Save the World. And that idea is what we'll be looking at for 4 weeks. Not that friendship always does save the world, or that friendship always has saved the world, but that friendship can save the world.
And we're looking into the book of Ruth to see how friendship did that in the world once and just might do again in your world.
So during these 4 weeks, we're asking you to really prioritize meeting together. We realize it's a lot to ask, believe us, we know. We have a group that meets in our home too, so we are really in this with you.
And during that time, we'll be asking you to do a couple of things together as a group. But your video hosts each week, all of whom are community group leaders here at Mosaic, will give you instructions about those at the end.
So each week, you can expect a brief teaching from a chapter of the book of Ruth, a main idea, a quote or two from our book, and what we hope are 4 great questions to ask and answer together. After each question, just push pause on the video and then come back when you're ready for the next one.
And really, above and beyond all of this, our hope is that each person sitting with you around your table or together in a living room or backyard, that you would all grow closer and feel loved by Jesus and one another more deeply as a result of this time.
All right, so here we go. Enjoy.
Hey Mosaic, I'm Jenny Bowden.
And I'm Trinice Pleasant. Welcome to week 2 of the Friendship Can Save the World discussion group.
In the second chapter of Ruth, we read about the beginning of the friendship shared by Ruth and Boaz. But really, Ruth too offers us more than just a friendly story. As a work of literature belonging to the Hebrew narrative genre, the book of Ruth is meant to shape our theology by artfully using story to reveal who God is and how his people should relate to him and others, given the truth about God's nature and person.
Our Western individualistic perspective often causes us to see Bible stories as primarily moralistic instead of theological. We insert ourselves as the main character in the narrative, accidentally assuming the story is mainly about us, instead of remembering the principal actor in any Bible story is God. When we let our curiosity about who God is lead us through Ruth 2, we discover a clear view of a wide-sweeping cultural theme. The God of the Bible is a God of covenant love. The Hebrew word for covenant love, hesed, is used 4 times in the book of Ruth. In Ruth 2, Boaz lavished hesed on Ruth before he even knew her name. His generous treatment of Ruth eventually connected his life with God's greater redemptive story in a unique way. But to begin our exploration of Ruth 2, let's consider this question. What does Boaz's friendship with Ruth teach us about God's covenant love? Let's turn to the story in Ruth 2 to find out.
When Boaz first saw Ruth, she was gleaning in his field, picking up the leftover and stray scraps of grain that fell to the ground behind the workers. This excess grain was Ruth and Naomi's only hope for survival, and their right to gather, as it is commanded by God in Leviticus 19. Ruth's presence in the field piqued Boaz's curiosity, and he asked the field's overseer about the identity of the unfamiliar woman gleaning.
The overseer then identified Ruth as the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. Not only did this description of Ruth fail to name her as Naomi's daughter-in-law, which would highlight her rightful place in Bethlehem as a member of Naomi's family, but his words also reduce Ruth's primary identity to one label, an outsider from a foreign land. However, Boaz rejected the overseer's marginalization of Ruth and turned to Ruth with this word of friendship. My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. Ruth 2:8-9.
When Ruth later asked Boaz why he was so generous to her, Boaz honors Ruth for her sacrificial faithfulness to Naomi, affirms her as a valuable part of Naomi's family, and declares his desire for Ruth to experience God's hesed in return. He says, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and your mother and your homeland and came to live with the people that you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Ruth 2:11 and 12.
Here's the main point we want to discuss together. When we refuse to reduce others to one specific cultural label, we make space for God's covenant love to flourish.
Here's a quote from Friendship Can Save the World. Boaz was quick to be generous towards Ruth. He offered Ruth two privileges afforded to him as a well-connected, powerful, wealthy male landowner in ancient Bethlehem. He gave her wise advice: don't go and glean in another field, and strong protection: I have told the men not to lay a hand on you. Boaz recognized the possible threat to Ruth when the overseer first identified her as a racial outsider. He then risked his comfort, safety, and reputation when he chose to provide for her. A heart full of hesed is a heart that desires a relationship full of God's diverse beauty. It generously offers others any privilege or provision it has in abundance. That heart communicates what Boaz communicated. Don't glean from another field. Stay here, in this place, this space, this community, this church with me. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you have what you need most of all. Friendship Can Save the World, Chapter 5.
Let's talk about what we've heard so far. We have 4 questions inspired by Boaz's friendship with Ruth. First question: why do we sometimes tend to view others as insiders or outsiders? And why are we sometimes tempted to label others as one particular kind of person? Take a few minutes and keep an eye on the clock, and we will come back in a few.
Here's our second question. Boaz's mother was Rahab, a foreigner who famously helped Israel defeat Jericho in Joshua 2. How do you think her influence in Boaz's life shaped how Boaz viewed foreigners like Ruth?
Philippians 2 teaches us to humbly value other people above ourselves, pointing to how Jesus, who is God, humbly became a man in order to rescue us from our sins. How is the story of Boaz's friendship with Ruth a foreshadowing of the gospel? And how can his example help us live the gospel in greater measure?
Let's take a minute and share from our own lives. If you're comfortable, can you share about a time that you needed to be welcome but instead felt more like an outsider? Or can you share about a time when you were new to a place or a group and received a welcoming abundance of God's covenantal love?
Here's a final quote for you today. Christ's love and faithfulness turned outsiders and foreigners into our friends and family. Imagine what our friendships, families, and churches could be if we showed up rejoicing our unique differences and celebrating our mutual need for covenantal love and faithfulness beyond compare. Imagine what we could glean from one another if we fought for everyone present to feel valued and represented as best we could, given the demographics of where we live. Friendship Can Save the World, Chapter 5.
Spend the final minutes of your time practicing covenantal love by sharing with the group something that you admire about the person to your right. Maybe you don't know them well, and that's okay. Do they have a bright smile, a great voice, or cool shoes? Did they say something tonight that you found interesting, insightful, or funny? The point of this exercise is to make sure that you share something that acknowledges that we all are valuable people worthy of generous kindness and love.